So I want you to take a second and look at the globe sitting on your desk. Or, just picture one in your head.
Right, the classic classroom globe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It looks so permanent, right? Like the continents are perfectly painted in their little spots, the North Pole's at the top, the South Pole's at the bottom.
It all feels very fixed.
Totally. And like the physical dimensions of that sphere seem like an absolute unchanging fact. But, and this is why we are here today, what if that globe is completely lying to you?
Well, according to the source documents we're jumping into today, it absolutely is lying to you.
Right, because the material for this deep dive makes just a staggering claim. It argues that the Earth you are standing on right now, it actually used to be 300 kilometers wider.
Which is massive.
Yeah, and that it used to spin significantly slower, and that it used to orbit millions of miles further away from the sun.
It's a theory that completely dismantles the uniformitarian model of geology. You know, that model we're all taught in school.
Right, the idea that the Earth only changes through like incredibly slow, steady processes for millions of years.
Exactly. But the texts we are analyzing today, they present this hyperdynamic, mathematically precise model, one where planetary structure is, well, it's dictated by sudden, incredibly violent cosmic adjustments.
And the whole mission of this deep dive for you listening today is to examine how this source material merges these completely disparate fields. I mean, we are looking at a document that takes ancient texts, specifically like the Mahabharata, the Hebrew Bible's account of Noah, indigenous Polynesian oral histories, and cross-references them with modern astrophysics.
Right. Astrophysics, gravitational mathematics, and deep-sea geological anomalies, it's incredibly thorough.
It is. The core thesis here is that a 51-degree shift of the Earth's poles, a literal shrinking of the planet's circumference, and this catastrophic orbital decay, all of that maps perfectly onto the global flood myth of ancient civilizations.
And the most compelling aspect of this research, at least to me, is that it doesn't treat ancient mythology as just allegory.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge point.
Right. It treats these texts as the surviving, traumatized human memory of indisputable astrophysical laws playing out. Like, it argues these were literal, documented observations of an Earth undergoing a structural transformation.
It's wild to think about. But we need to start where the source starts, which is this massive geographical anomaly.
The location of the ancient tolls.
Yes. The text claims the ancient North Pole wasn't located in the Arctic Ocean where it is today. It was sitting in Central Asia. Specifically, at the Pamir Plateau, which borders modern-day Tajikistan, China, and Afghanistan.
Which is right in the middle of a massive landmass.
Exactly. And if you have a pole sitting in the middle of the Eurasian landmass, you don't just gently slide it up to the Arctic. I mean, the sheer kinetic energy required to move a planetary pole 51 degrees across the crust is almost unfathomable.
It really is. And the source outlines that this was not a gradual glide at all. We are dealing with the physics of extreme cosmic acceleration here. The whole premise relies on a sudden shift in the planet's broader cosmic trajectory. When a planet experiences severe acceleration or deceleration in its orbit, its outermost layer, the crust, cannot maintain its grip on the underlying mantle.
Okay, but I want to challenge this orbital mechanics concept right away because, and maybe you're thinking this too, if a planet suddenly drops or shifts its position in space, wouldn't the gravitational shearing forces alone just rip it to pieces? Or, strip away the atmosphere?
That's a very fair question.
Like, how does the source explain the planet actually surviving this event rather than just becoming, I don't know, a sterile, pulverized rock?
Well, it comes down to the fluid dynamics of the Earth's interior. So the crust we live on is actually incredibly thin. Relative to the rest of the planet, it's like the skin on an apple.
Okay, the skin on an apple.
Right. And it floats on the asthenosphere, which is this highly viscous, semi-fluid layer of the upper mantle.
So it's not totally solid underneath us?
Exactly. And the source argues that this semi-fluid layer acted as a catastrophic shock absorber. When the Earth's core and mantle shifted their momentum due to those cosmic forces, the solid crust didn't absorb the full shearing force right away.
Oh, wow. So it slipped.
Yes. Instead of shattering, it lost its grip. It slipped over that semi-fluid layer.
So the core moves.
Yeah.
And the crust essentially suffers a delayed reaction. It's like a rotational whiplash.
That's exactly it, a rotational whiplash.
So the planet is rotating eastward, the cosmic acceleration hits, and the crust basically snaps back over the slippery mantle to try and compensate.
Precisely. And Because the Earth is a rotating sphere, that snap doesn't just follow a neat straight line.
Because it's curved.
Right, the rotational dynamics force the slipping crust into a curve. The source meticulously traces what it calls the wandering path of the North Pole.
So when the crests slip, the pole didn't just drop straight north from the Pamir Plateau.
No, it traced this massive, highly destructive arc northwest. According to the text, it's dragged out of Central Asia, carved a path right across the European continent, tore through Scandinavia, and finally settled into the modern Arctic basin.
Man, if the rotational axis of the planet is carving a trench of just climatic destruction through the heart of Eurasia, that immediately raises a geometric problem.
The law of antitheses.
Yeah, because you can't just slide the top of a sphere without dragging the bottom. I mean, if the North Pole is moving through Europe, what on earth is happening to the South Pole?
This is where the source applies that exact geographical law, the law of antipodes. In planetary geometry, the two poles must remain exactly 180 degrees opposite each other at all times.
Right, because of the axis of rotation.
Exactly. It's a mathematical absolute. So wherever the North Pole goes, the South Pole must mirror it on the exact opposite side of the globe.
So if we reverse engineer the math on that, when the North Pole was stationed up at the Pamir Plateau, the ancient South Pole had to be located.
Where?
Right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Yes. The math pinpoints the exact ancient coordinates at 39 degrees south and 108 degrees west.
And what's there today?
Well, for context, that places the ancient South Pole directly adjacent to modern-day Easter Island.
Wait, Easter Island? That completely upends our entire understanding of the Pacific.
Oh, it changes everything.
Because we think of the Pacific, and specifically that area around Polynesia, as this vast tropical marine environment. But if the South Pole was located there, that entire hemisphere was not a tropical paradise.
Not at all. It was a frozen wasteland. The source argues we need to picture an environment identical to modern Antarctica, but sitting right in the middle of what is now the Pacific Ring of Fire.
That is just, it's hard to visualize.
I know. We are talking about miles-thick glacial ice sheets covering these massive, now submerged land masses.
And as the North Pole took its whiplash journey through Scandinavia, that law of antipodes means this massive Pacific ice cap was being violently dragged from Easter Island down toward modern-day Antarctica.
Yes. The entire crust shifted in unison.
Which means a 51-degree crustal displacement was shoving literally every single landmass on Earth into a radically new climate zone.
Exactly. Tropical regions were forced into freezing latitudes, and frozen wastelands were dragged directly toward the burning equator.
It's just absolute chaos.
But, and this is a huge but, the source emphasizes that this slipping of the crust, this wandering path, it was merely a symptom.
A symptom of what?
Well, the crust slipped because the planet's fundamental relationship with the sun was being altered.
Okay, this is the crux of the theory right here, and honestly, the most mathematically dense part of the document. The pole shift wasn't just some random geological hiccup.
No, it was driven by what the text calls cosmic contraction.
Right. The assertion is that during the era ancient texts call the Dwarka Yuga, the Earth was orbiting exactly 1.10 astronomical units away from the sun.
For a baseline here, 1.000 AU is our current orbit, right? About 93 million miles from the sun.
So the source claims that the Earth was roughly 10% further out in space.
Exactly. But then a localized gravitational event, maybe a shift in the solar system's barycenter or some resonance disruption, caused the Earth's orbit to decay.
The planet effectively fell toward the sun.
Yes. It migrated from 1.10 AU down to our current 1.00 AU.
And if we moved millions of miles closer to the solar fire, I mean, the thermodynamics and gravitational forces acting on the planet would have to undergo a violent recalculation. You know, orbits don't just shrink without a corresponding change in the planet's momentum and mass distribution.
That is exactly where the astrophysics comes in. Because as the Earth dropped into a tighter orbit, Kepler's laws of planetary motion dictate that its orbital velocity had to increase.
It had to move faster around the sun.
Right, but to maintain the conservation of angular momentum, the actual physical structure of the Earth had to adapt. And the source provides a really specific calculation here.
What's the calculation?
It says that as the orbit tightened to 1.00 AU, the Earth's moment of inertia decreased by exactly 1.46%.
Okay, so the moment of inertia. That's essentially a measure of how spread out an object's mass is from its center of rotation, right?
Precisely.
I think the best way to visualize this 1.46% drop for anyone listening is the classic figure skater analogy.
Oh, that's a perfect way to explain it.
Yeah, picture a skater spinning on the ice with their arms extended super wide. Their mass is spread out, so their moment of inertia is high, and they spin relatively slowly.
Right.
But when they want to execute one of those ultra-fast spins, what do? They pull their arms in tight against their chest. They physically shrink their diameter.
And by pulling their mass inward, they decrease their moment of inertia.
Exactly. And their rotational speed instantly increases to compensate.
So under this theory, the Earth was the skater with its arms out.
Oh.
And as it dropped into the 1.00 AU orbit, the gravitational mechanics forced it to decrease its moment of inertia by 1.46%. It literally had to pull its mass inward.
And just like the skater, pulling its mass tighter meant its rotational spin sped up.
Yes. And the math correlating this in the source is just fascinating. The text claims that prior to this orbital drop, back during the Dwarka Yuga, a single solar year was exactly 360 days long.
Just a perfect mathematical circle.
A perfect 360. But because the Earth was forced to spin faster on its axis to conserve momentum, it began completing more rotations during its journey around the sun.
So the years stretched.
Exactly. It stretched from 360 days to our current 365.25 days.
And the text ties that 1.46% drop in inertia directly to the addition of those 5.25 days.
It does. It is a precise mathematical correlation. But the physical consequence of decreasing the moment of inertia is where this theory moves from, like, astrophysics into straight-up apocalyptic geology.
Right, because for a solid, rocky planet to pull its mass inward like a figure skater, it has to physically shrink.
It does. It has to become smaller.
And the dimensions provided here are staggering. I mean, the text calculates that to achieve that 1.46% inertia drop, the new radius of the Earth became 99.26% of its old radius.
Right, and in practical terms, that means the planet lost about 95 kilometers in its total diameter.
95 kilometers, which cascades into the most devastating metric in the entire document, which is a loss of 300 kilometers in total circumference.
300 kilometers gone.
The equator of the Earth literally shrank by 300 kilometers. Now let's really think about the thermodynamics and the physical reality of that.
It's almost unimaginable.
It is, because 300 kilometers, for context, is roughly the distance from New York to Boston. If the Earth were just a balloon, deflating it wouldn't be an issue. But the Earth's crust is a rigid shell. It's made of granite, basalt, tectonic plates that are miles thick.
So think of it like a cooling, soft-boiled egg.
Oh, that's good.
Right, as the egg cools, the interior volume shrinks. But the hard, calcified shell on the outside cannot simply shrink with it. It has a fixed surface area.
So what happens?
Well, as the interior pulls away, the rigid shell is subjected to immense compressive forces. It fractures. The edges of the shell overlap, they buckle, and they crush together to force themselves into the new, smaller volume underneath.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. When you reduce the circumference of a solid planet by 300 kilometers, you suddenly have 300 kilometers of extra solid rock that has absolutely no place to exist.
It can't just evaporate.
Right, it has to go somewhere.
It has to be absorbed into the crust through catastrophic subduction and buckling. The text describes how this 300-kilometer deficit created unimaginable pressure on the tectonic plates.
So everything is just grinding together.
Exactly. Deep ocean trenches, like the Mariana Trench, would have been violently forced downward, and continental plates were forced to overlap, thrusting upward to absorb the excess rock.
Which would explain the sudden, violent creation of massive mountain ranges. I mean, we are taught that the Himalayas formed over tens of millions of years as the Indian plate slowly crept into the Eurasian plate.
Right, the uniformitarian model.
But under this model, mountains are essentially the scars of the Earth's shell buckling to accommodate a shrinking interior.
That's exactly what the text argues.
And the thermodynamics of crushing 300 kilometers of solid rock into the crust. It would be terrifying. The friction alone would generate enough heat to melt the bedrock, triggering global supervolcanism.
You would have planet-wide earthquakes, atmospheric ash choking out the sun from thousands of simultaneous volcanic eruptions, and a surface that was, frankly, structurally failing.
But, and this is where it gets even worse, the ground literally tearing itself apart is only half of the apocalypse.
Because of the water.
Exactly. Because if the crust is violently shifting 51 degrees due to the whiplash we talked about, and the planet is simultaneously shrinking, we have to account for the ice.
This brings us right back to the Easter Island South Pole.
Right.
We established that the Pacific Ocean in the southern hemisphere contained massive ancient ice sheets. Well, as the crust slipped, Those billions of tons of ice were suddenly dragged out of the freezing polar vortex.
They were displaced.
Violently displaced. They were pushed into warmer, temperate latitudes and ultimately toward the burning heat of the new equator.
I mean, if you take a continent of solid ice and shove it into the tropics, the thermodynamics demand a catastrophic melt. It wouldn't just thaw, it would liquefy at a terrifying rate.
And the geological record actually supports rapid melting events, which mainstream science calls meltwater pulses.
So mainstream geology acknowledges this rapid melting.
Oh, absolutely. But the source attributes these pulses directly to the displaced polar caps melting under the equatorial sun. The text claims this rapid influx of water caused ocean levels to surge abruptly by 14 to 20 meters.
A 20-meter sudden sea level rise it's apocalyptic. I mean, even a 3-meter rise today would erase almost every major coastal city on Earth.
Right.
So a 20-meter wall of water combined with a buckling, shrinking tectonic floor means entire continents would be swallowed whole.
And the source points to modern geology for proof of exactly that. It specifically highlights the 2017 scientific confirmation of Zealandia.
Zealandia, that's the sunken continent, right?
Yes. Zealandia is a massive, submerged continent roughly the size of India that sits beneath the modern Pacific Ocean. Only its highest mountain peaks are visible today, and we know them as the islands of New Zealand.
Now, mainstream geology argues Zealandia sank tens of millions of years ago due to continental rifting, right?
That's the standard model, yeah.
But this source provides a radically different and much more recent timeline.
According to this text, Zealandia was the ancient Antarctica. Because of its proximity to that Easter Island pole, it was a massive above-water continent buried under miles of glacial ice.
Wow.
But when the planet contracted, Zealandia was caught in the worst possible geographical position. The tectonic plates beneath it buckled downward to absorb the shrinking circumference, and simultaneously, 20 meters of glacial meltwater poured over it.
So it was drowned from above and pulled down from below.
It was permanently drowned.
And it isn't just Zealandia that the text mentions, right? It connects this exact same mechanism to Kumari Kandam.
Yes, the legendary sunken landmass in the Indian Ocean described in ancient Tamil literature.
The theory suggests these continents were all casualties of this shrinking planet and surging oceans. But if Zealandia and the Pacific coast were covered in a miles-thick ice cap relatively recently, there should be undeniable physical scars on the rock.
And there are. The source explicitly points to the modern coasts of New Zealand and the fjords of Chile.
It's there.
These areas feature incredibly deep glacial striations. Glaciers, they act like continental-scale sandpaper.
Right.
As they move, they carve deep, unmistakable parallel grooves into the bedrock.
And they also carve very specific terrain, like rivers carve valleys in the shape of a V, because the water cuts straight down into the rock. But a heavy glacier bulldozes the earth, carving a massive, wide U-shaped valley.
Exactly. And both New Zealand and Chile are completely covered in these U-shaped valleys and deep glacial striations.
Which is wild because they're totally temperate climates today.
Right. Mainstream geologists attribute these scars to standard ice ages. But the source argues this is the smoking gun of the Easter Island South Pole. These scars exist in places that are temperate today because those specific rocks used to sit directly under the rotational axis of the planet.
This is where the synthesis of geology and human history in this document becomes truly brilliant. We aren't just looking at striations in Chilean bedrock. We're looking at the oral histories of the people who actually survived this.
The human element.
Yeah. The text points to Polynesian cultures and the indigenous folklore of Easter Island itself, which heavily feature passed-down memories of a massive sunken continent they refer to as Hiva or Hawaii.
And the cultural memory perfectly mirrors the mathematical narrative of the text.
They align perfectly.
They do. These aren't just allegorical myths invented to explain the ocean. The source treats them as the traumatized, multi-generational testimonies of the descendants who literally watched their ancestral homelands sink beneath the waves.
So just put yourself in the shoes of a human being living through this for a second. The ground beneath your feet is violently shrinking, forcing the bedrock to fold and shatter.
Earthquakes everywhere.
Supervolcanoes are erupting because the crust is grinding 300 kilometers of rock into magma. And at the exact same time, billions of tons of ancient ice are melting, raising the ocean by 20 meters and drowning whatever land hasn't already buckled.
There's nowhere to run.
It is a dual-pronged apocalypse of crushing earth and rising water.
It is the ultimate evolutionary bottleneck. But and the source is meticulous in clarifying this crucial detail. The physics involved in shifting a planet 51 degrees and shrinking its circumference by 300 kilometers. It cannot dissipate in a single day.
Or even a single century, I'd imagine.
Right. The thermodynamic energy is just too massive.
Yeah, if the Earth lost almost 1% of its radius overnight, the sheer kinetic heat would liquefy the crust entirely. There would be no survivors to pass down the myths of Hiva or, Noah.
Precisely. Therefore, the source outlines that this was an agonizingly slow 16,000-year-long step-down process.
16,000 years of this.
Yes. The Earth didn't just snap from 1.7 AU to 1.00 AU. It stepped down incrementally. It would violently shift, release a massive amount of geological pressure through earthquakes and floods, and then stabilize for a few centuries or millennia.
Giving people enough time to rebuild.
Exactly. People would rebuild. But then the orbit would decay further, the inertia would drop again, and another localized apocalypse would occur.
And this is where the document transitions into like a chronological masterclass. It provides a highly specific timeline of this 16,000-year step down, and it uses ancient astronomical text as literal clocks to track it.
Yes, specifically the Yugas.
Right. It argues that the trigger for this cosmic shift aligned exactly with the transition between the ancient Yugas.
The Yugas are often dismissed as mere philosophical cycles of time in ancient Hindu texts, just, metaphors. But the source argues they were sophisticated astronomical tracking mechanisms based on axial precession.
So they were tracking the stars.
Exactly. And the text identifies the exact start of this cosmic instability at the transition from the Dwapara Yuga to the Kali Yuga.
Culturally, that transition is marked by the immediate aftermath of the Mahabharata War and the physical death of Krishna. The source treats these not as religious metaphors, but as historical markers of when the Earth's orbit first began its catastrophic decay.
And the timeline it builds from that moment is just fascinating. The text maps the first major geological rupture of this step-down process to the year 19,830 BCE, which is exactly 170 years after the Yuga transition begins.
So what happened in 19,830 BCE?
The internal pressure of the shrinking Earth forced the first massive buckle in the crust, and the legendary city of Dwarka sinks.
Dwarka is a perfect example of how this theory operates, because in Mahabharata, Dwarka is described as Krishna's magnificent, heavily fortified coastal city that was completely swallowed by the ocean.
And it wasn't just a story.
No. Modern marine archaeologists have actually conducted acoustic surveys off the coast of Gujarat in India and found massive, geometric, city-like ruins deep underwater. If the Earth is shrinking and sea levels are violently surging due to meltwater pulses, the sinking of a coastal fortress in 19,830 BCE isn't a myth. It's a predicted data point of the step-down process.
It's hard data. The text then jumps forward, tracking the continued erratic wandering path of the poles and the incremental contractions. By 12,202 BCE, it marks another period of stabilization where humanity rebuilt.
And who was rebuilding then?
The text specifically notes this as the era when the lineage of Adam and Eve began to flourish.
This is such a bold, fascinating synthesis. It is taking Vedic history, the Mahabharata and Dwarka, and weaving it seamlessly with Abrahamic history, the lineage of Adam and Eve.
Right, it doesn't pick sides.
It treats them not as competing religious truths, but as distinct, localized human populations navigating the exact same drawn-out planetary disaster.
It democratizes global mythology into a single geological record. It's really elegant. And then the timeline moves into an era that modern paleoclimatology actually recognizes as deeply traumatic.
The 11,000 BCE window.
Yes. Between 11,200 and 11,177 BCE, the text marks a massive climax in the disaster, driven by a severe slip in the crust and a resulting meltwater surge.
And for anyone listening who follows geology, that exact window aligns perfectly with what mainstream science calls the Younger Dryas climate crisis.
The Younger Dryas. It is one of the most heavily debated periods in modern geology. Ice cores from Greenland show that around 11,000 BCE, global temperatures violently plummeted.
Like basically overnight.
Yes, and it was followed by a period of rapid extreme warming and massive sea level rises that disrupted ocean salinity worldwide.
Now, mainstream science usually blames a comet impact or the sudden collapse of the North American Laurentide ice sheet for the Younger Dryas.
Right, those are the leading mainstream theories.
But this source argues those are misinterpretations of the data. It claims that temperature swings and meltwater pulses of the Younger Dryas were just another violent step down in the Earth's orbital decay.
The sudden temperature shifts were caused by the crust slipping further along its wandering path. It dragged new land masses into the freezing polar zones while pushing old ice caps into the equatorial heat.
And culturally, the text anchors this exact 11,200 BCE window to the final extinction of the Pandavas' lineage from the Mahabharata,
Yeah.
showing how these localized records mirror the geological ice core data perfectly.
It's all connected.
But man, it is just psychological torture on a species level. Generation after generation living through cyclical cataclysms. The ground stops shaking, you build a civilization, and 1,000 years later, the moment of inertia drops again, the crust snaps, and a wall of water wipes you out.
And this agony continues for 16,000 years.
Until it reaches the climax.
The absolute climax, the final breaking point of the timeline.
Which brings us to the year 4000 BCE.
Yes. According to the calculations in the text, exactly 16,000 years into the Kali Yuga, the Earth finally bottomed out into its new stable orbit of 1.00 AU.
It finally made it.
But finalizing that orbit meant the internal geological tension hit its absolute maximum. The final fractions of that 300-kilometer circumference loss had to be absorbed. The moment of inertia permanently locked in.
And the result was the final, most catastrophic tearing of the Earth's crust. The final shockwave. If this is 4000 BCE, how is this ultimate climax remembered by the humans who survived it?
The violent final adjustment of the crust and the last massive melting of the misplaced Easter Island ice sheets created the ultimate global deluge.
It was a great flood.
The source explicitly connects this 4000 BCE event to the story of Noah's reign. It argues that the Great Flood wasn't just a localized river overflowing, it was the final atmospheric and oceanic equalization of a stabilizing planet.
Wow.
And the text directly links the physics of this final stabilization to the human memory of Noah's Ark coming to rest on the newly thrust-up mountains of Ararat.
What we are looking at in this document is a grand unifying theory of human history and planetary physics. It takes the acoustic ruins of Dwarka in 19,830 BCE, the Abrahamic lineage, the Greenland ice core data of the Younger Dryas, the U-shaped valleys of New Zealand, and Noah's flood in 4000 BCE, and links them all together.
It argues they are all symptoms of the exact same 16,000-year cosmic contraction.
It provides a rigorous mathematical framework for our oldest stories. And equally important is what the text says happens after 4000 BCE. Once that final shockwave dissipated, the Earth stabilized. The step-down process was finally over.
The rotational whiplash finally caught up to the core's momentum. The car stopped accelerating.
Right, and the source details the aftermath, the era we call modern history. Following the 4000 BCE flood, the North Pole finally ceased its wandering path and locked into its current position in the Arctic Ocean.
And the South Pole, dictated by the law of antipodes, locked into the frozen center of Antarctica.
The 300 kilometers of missing crust were fully subducted into the newly formed mountain ranges and oceanic trenches. Everything found its place.
Exactly. And the angular momentum. The moment of inertia was perfectly balanced for the new 1.00 AU orbit. The Earth's spin stabilized, and the solar year was permanently cemented at 365.25 days.
The new Earth was forged. It was physically smaller, it was spinning faster, it was deeply scarred by glacial tearing and tectonic buckling. But it was finally stable.
It is almost difficult to wrap your head around the sheer scale of the astrophysics and thermodynamics we just explored.
You look at that painted globe on your desk, and suddenly it is not just a reliable piece of machinery. It is the battered, fractured survivor of a 16,000-year cosmic war for stability.
To synthesize exactly what this source text has laid out, we have explored a model where ancient mythology is treated as raw astronomical data.
We trace the physics of a 51-degree rotational whiplash across the Earth's semi-fluid mantle.
We unpack the Keplerian mechanics that caused a 1.46% drop in inertia, resulting in a 300-kilometer crushing of the planet's circumference.
We track the thermodynamic reality of ancient ice caps displaced into the equator, drowning continents like Zealandia.
And we followed a chronologically precise timeline that unites Krishna, the Younger Dryas, and Noah into a single, mathematically driven narrative.
What I find most profoundly moving about this theory is the dignity it restores to our ancestors. It suggests that the ancient myths of massive floods and sinking cities aren't just the products of primitive imagination or exaggerated campfire tales.
They are data.
Exactly. They are the desperately preserved, meticulously recorded memories of astrophysics playing out on a planetary scale. Our ancestors were writing down the mathematics of an apocalypse, hiding the data in stories so we wouldn't forget.
It is a stark reminder that the universe operates on strict, unforgiving mechanics. Occasionally, human beings are simply caught in the gears of those mechanics. Our global myths are just the echoes of the grounding of those gears.
Which leaves me with a final, highly specific thought for you to ponder. Long after this deep dive ends, the source paints a picture of an Earth that underwent an excruciating 16,000-year transformation of its crust, oceans, and moment of inertia, just to reach the delicate 1.00 AU and 365.25-day balance we enjoy today.
It found its equilibrium.
But if a 1.46% shift in the Earth's mass distribution was enough to wipe out Zealandia and trigger the Great Flood, what happens when we alter the weight distribution of the planet today?
Oh, that's a terrifying thought.
Right. As the modern polar ice caps in Greenland and Antarctica melt at unprecedented rates, billions of tons of water weight are being redistributed from the poles to the equator. Are we subtly altering our own moment of inertia?
Shifting the balance on the crust.
Exactly. What happens if that thermodynamic weight shift is the cosmic trigger required to start the next whiplash?
It is a chilling application of the theory. The geological stability we take for granted might just be a temporary pause in a much larger, highly sensitive mathematical cycle.
Keep questioning the mechanics of the world around you. Keep looking at that globe on your desk with a little more suspicion, and keep learning. If you found the math behind this myth as fascinating as we did, share this deep dive with someone who loves a truly paradigm-shifting mystery. We will be back soon with another journey into the unknown. Keep diving deep.